A doctor goes to a group of alcoholics and he says, "Great news, I've developed a cure for alcoholism. Just drink this one bottle and you'll be cured forever." And there's a moment of silence amongst the alcoholics until finally one of them sheepishly asks, "What happens if I drink two?" Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Now, listen. In this difficult episode, I am going to tell you specifically and unequivocally what my higher power is when I need one. This video is aimed solely at those who struggle with the idea of a higher power. So it's just for those people. If you are a person who is completely secure in your higher power and your relationship with God, please go do something productive. Stop watching this. Go do something of benefit to the world. Because I'm about to step on about 1,000 different landmines. So the fewer people who see it, the better. The institution of AA doesn't like people talking openly about the difficult stuff. But judging by my emails and my Instagram messages, it's the difficult stuff, in this case the God stuff, that is keeping a lot of people who really need help out of AA. The vast majority of emails and messages that I get are about God in AA. They're either about God in AA or they're about psilocybin. It's like 1/3 of people contact me to say they like what I do. 1/3 are asking me how I negotiate God in AA. And the final third are trying to sell me magic mushrooms. It just comes with the territory. But people want to know how I handle the God thing in AA. And I'm going to tell you today. Now, for those of you remaining, I am going to go ahead and assume that means that you are in some kind of conflict with the nature of God in AA. You might be wrestling with what it means to give in to a higher power. I think it would be useful to tell you truly exactly where I'm coming from. What is my actual position? Just to stop you being distracted trying to guess what I really think. I'll just tell you up front. I am not a religious person. There is not much spirituality in me. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. And I'm also not snobby about it. Because there is a lot of snobbery in AA. And the snobbery is opposite but equal. And what I mean by that is, like, in AA, fundamentalist Christians and progressive polyamorous anarcho-communist atheists are the same. In AA, they're perfect mirrors of each other, and they are equally snobby about each other too. I've seen both kinds in the rooms. I've listened to born-again Christians from Florida talk about being led to sobriety through Christ, and I've listened to dreadlocked crystal healers from Italy talk about aligning their chakras. And I've listened to blue-haired, non-binary punks in Berlin talk about fucking their way out of addiction. And while all of those perspectives are very different, they are all also identical. As a path to sobriety, at least. On one hand, the devoutly religious members of AA believe that the atheists will fail in their sobriety because they can't give themselves fully over to a higher power. And on the other hand, the super progressive, liberal, atheist anarchists believe the religious people will fail because if their religion is challenged, so is their sobriety. Equal but opposite. I fall somewhere between the Berlin gender punks and the Alabama fundamentalists. I am something of an AA centrist. And as a not very religious person, I also found the idea of giving in to a higher power to be an obstacle in the early stages of my sobriety. And that's why I'm making this, is to reassure other early sobriety people that you don't have to give up your entire identity in order to get sober, but you do have to give up some. Because despite not being a religious person, and despite still keeping AA at arm's distance most of the time, I do still have a lot of confidence in AA as a component of long-term sobriety. I will defend AA, even though I'm not attending really very regularly anymore. I do still think AA is the place for a newly sober person to go. So let's talk about it. What is AA's higher power? As a word person, as someone who deals with language on a daily basis, works in communications, I truly admire the phrase higher power. I think it's actually beautiful. It is suitably poetic, suitably objective, and suitably vague. And I'm on board with the idea of a higher power because I have found a loophole. And that's what I'm going to tell you about. On the surface of it, the idea of a higher power is absolutely central to AA, the system. Superficially, it is AA's way of talking about God without saying God, in an effort to appeal, I suppose, to non-Judeo-Christian people. And it works. Higher power, the phrase, is extremely agile. I admire that in any piece of language. But AA is a spiritual organization. That is a fact. It regards itself as inclusive of all faiths. And in practice, in the rooms, it is. But in doctrine, dogmatically, according to the literature of AA, it is very firmly Judeo-Christian and a very firmly American interpretation of Judeo-Christianity. And it rather implies that you should be too. You should at least conform to a kind of Judeo-Christian model. The 12 steps mention God more than the 10 commandments in the Bible. Yes, I counted. I drink a lot of coffee, and I have too much time on my hands. And more than that, steps 2, 3, 5, 6, and 11 all refer specifically to a higher power. So you have God and higher power is all over the 12-step program. Now, if you're a religious person to start with, or even if you're just kind of vaguely spiritual, that stuff is no problem. You are going to have a smoother and less complex time in AA than a non-religious person. And like I said, this video isn't really aimed at you unless you are objectively interested in the kind of intellectual gymnastics non-believers have to put themselves through in order to conform to the program. And AA is not ambiguous about its demand for some element of spirituality in its members. It requires you to believe in something bigger than yourself. And at some point, even as the hardened atheist, if you are such, you will be faced with God at some point in the process of AA as you go through the system. And you'll have to say God occasionally. For example, you may be asked to read the 12 steps or one particular step, or you might volunteer to read some of the literature at the start of the meeting. And in those cases, it's unavoidable to say God. If you want to get sober, you will have to come to peace with the word God at some point in AA. It's inevitable. But it's called a higher power so that it is intentionally vague. It is deliberately open to your interpretation and left to you to choose what shape that higher power takes for you personally. AA encourages you to make of it what you will. And for many people who struggle with the concept of a higher power and who reject the idea of turning themselves over to God, the group itself, that is to say AA, becomes the higher power. For a lot of people new to the program, that's enough. It's not what I did. I'll tell you what I did in a moment. And just as a side note, in more liberal places like Berlin, which is my main point of reference, it's really common to hear people ask directly what someone's higher power is. What's your higher power? Just assume that it's not God. And isn't that revealing? That in really progressive places, that you would say to somebody, what is your higher power? With the assumption that it's not God. In the smoking area outside AA groups in Berlin, what is your higher power was like a normal question. It was like asking, which football team do you support, or what is your favourite Pokemon? And I remember one time it came up, and there was one of the AA old heads in the smoking area, a very grumpy Irish man. He was one of those guys who had no time for the kind of tattooed blue hairs who were common in places like Berlin. Someone asked him, what's your higher power? And he kind of shrugged and took a puff on his cigarette and just went, God. And the way that they looked at him, he may as well have said, Pikachu. And I was grateful he said it. I was grateful. I was like, thank fuck someone actually said it. Anyway, there are a couple of reasons why the higher power is so central to AA, why it's inescapable in AA. And they're good reasons. The higher power concept comes from Bill W., the kind of founder of AA and his founding group. It comes from their belief that alcoholism is too powerful for a single individual to overcome alone. Alcohol's grip is so tight that it requires a strength greater than our own, greater than we can possess, in order to break out of it. And step one, after all, is the admission that we are powerless over alcohol. Getting out of alcoholism requires help, and that's why some people make AA itself their higher power. And it's why some people use abstract concepts like love or fellowship or family or community, something outside yourself. And then for some, a higher power, any higher power at all, provides hope. By partially entrusting our destiny into a power greater than ourselves, we no longer feel like everything is our responsibility. We can delegate some of our worries about the future to this higher power, whatever it is. We can accept that some things are beyond our control, and that frees us up. That gives us some mental bandwidth to focus temporarily solely on our own sobriety. It provides some reassurance that some things beyond our control will be okay. And the biggest benefit for a lot of people, I think, of a higher power is in its ability to foster humility. A higher power, or a power greater than ourselves, has the indirect effect of making us feel very inconsequential, very small, like a small part of a giant system. Truly believing that the world is not revolving around you and your problems, and recognizing that you are just a tiny cog in a giant complex machine, is crucial for breaking down the kind of undeserved pride and rampant egoism common to many alcoholics, including me. So I promised I would tell you what my higher power is, and I'll do that right now. My higher power is Pikachu. No, not really. My higher power is entropy. The concept of entropy is my higher power. Like I said, there is a loophole in the God stuff. The loophole is designed in, it's there by design, it's supposed to be there. The higher power thing is supposed to be interpreted however you want. You make it meaningful to you. So if, like me, you are not a God person, then you are free to choose your higher power. I chose entropy, and if it appeals to you, you are free to use it too. Entropy is a concept that I stole and adapted from thermodynamics and various other fields of study. It represents the tendency for all physical systems to fall into disorder over time. More accurately, in thermodynamics, it is actually a measure of disorder, of randomness, I suppose, of chaos. Something with high entropy, like steam, for example, is very disordered. Something with low entropy, like ice, for example, is well ordered and has structure. And there are plenty more, even more satisfying conceptual uses for entropy. Like it appears in probability and in chaos theory and in semiotics, which is a big passion of mine, and communications in general, used to measure disorder within a system, or spontaneity. I like it for a lot of reasons, and the more that you learn about entropy, if you're minded like me, the better a fit it seems to be. We are all subject to the power of entropy. It is a power greater than ourselves. It's also poetic in a way that feels like it could fill a space that would otherwise be occupied by God. It's a good scientific substitute for spirituality, in other words. It can also be annotated mathematically. There's a number of ways to do it, and that fact makes it feel very tangible. You can see it written down. It's something, in a sense, that you can see. And I like these grand conceptual ideas because they are beautiful in the way that I think spiritual people see religion as beautiful. I think the way I feel about it is probably similar to the way a religious person thinks about the afterlife or heaven or something. You can't feel it, but you can sense it. And I think that is close to a religious feeling. And also entropy as a higher power is proven in my experience to be bulletproof. It attracts interest and support from humanists, from people who call themselves humanists and atheists and that kind of thing. And it does it without offending the religious people who tend to be very interested in it too. Everybody seems to understand where I'm kind of coming from when I say it, when I talk about entropy as a higher power. It works. And I've never heard anyone else say it, so... But look, I was raised by Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, and I grew up watching those atheist destroys creationist videos. That's what the internet was like in the early 2000s. But over the course of my life, I've learned, life has taught me that life isn't really like that, and that most of us are looking for connection with each other rather than difference. And that is especially true in recovery, and especially true in AA. I think one of the things that life has taught me is that religious people and non-religious people experience exactly the same sensations. We just give them different names. A religious person might name an experience as spiritual. They might have a spiritual experience. A non-religious person might experience exactly the same sensations but call it awe. One is a spiritual experience, the other is awestruck. And I remember lying on my back on a mountain plateau in Kyrgyzstan, and I was staring up at a sky that was so clear and so incomprehensibly beautiful, like I had never ever seen before. And I can imagine how somebody else might consider that a spiritual experience. They may look up at that night sky and see the hand of God. And I looked up and I saw the effects of entropy. but we're looking at the same thing. And we're experiencing the same sensations. We just give it different names. So, what if you really can't get over the God thing? Well, there are secular or semi-secular alternatives to AA. I really like refuge recovery, and that's a path to sobriety that's kind of mapped onto Buddhist philosophy and practices. There's a lot of meditation and mindfulness, but it is technically secular. There's no God in refuge recovery in the same way that there's no specific deity in Buddhism. And that appeals. And there is nothing wrong with meditation, that's for sure. But it is a very serious system, and it's very thoughtful, and it lacks, I think, the kind of occasional spontaneous joy and fun of AA. It is a very, very po-faced system. But the literature for it is extremely good. It's very serious. You'll see what I mean if you read into it, but it's a good system. And the truth is, you can read a lot of Buddhist teaching, and it sounds exactly like recovery teaching. It's already there. You don't even need a system. You could probably just be a Buddhist and sober. So check out Refuge Recovery. I'll put the link in the description. And then there is SMART. And SMART is definitively a secular and non-religious approach to sobriety. And that's worth a look if you are absolutely rejecting the idea of religion or spirituality or entropy. If you don't like any of that stuff, SMART might be an option for you. Again, link in the description. But my thing about SMART is, like, have you ever met anybody that is a SMART member? I mean, I've heard it mentioned about twice in my entire sober career. It's the kind of thing that we all recommend to other people, but none of us have actually done ourselves. It's like, you should try SMART. SMART's a good option for you. And like, it's called SMART, you know? Like, how snobby is that? Oh yes, it's the smart way to get sober. Yes, it's the thinking man's AA. It's the intellectual approach to sobriety. Shut up. I imagine the meetings are all held in like antique bookshops, and everybody's wearing black turtlenecks and smoking Gauloise cigarettes and sipping espressos with their pinkies out. Oh, I walked past an AA meeting on my way here. Oh, those poor cretins. Don't they know there is a smart alternative? That's exactly what I imagine they're like. But look, the truth is, when you're reaching out to people like me and you're saying, I want to go to AA, but I don't like the God stuff, you're looking for excuses not to go. That's the truth. That's what you're doing. You're looking for excuses, and you'll take any excuse not to go that you can, because God is not the problem. Your problem is not with God. Oh, but my atheism is an important part of my identity, and if I give that up, am I really me? Shut up, idiot. Shut up. Stop wasting everyone's time with your superiority, like you're the first person to have those thoughts. We all had those thoughts. Do you know what I think is the most widely used AA cliche of all? AA is a program full of like little idioms and phrases and cliches. But the one that I think I hear the most is actually this one. It's, I have a difficult relationship with AA. Everyone says that. I say it too. And that's because everyone has a difficult relationship with AA. It's almost redundant to say it. It's baked in. No one chooses to be in AA. No one's there for shits and giggles. No one wants to sit in a freezing church basement on a Friday night and listen to strangers complain about their problems, and then when those strangers have finished complaining, you have to volunteer to clean their cups. You'd have to be a fucking psychopath to do that for fun. No, I'm not an alcoholic, I just really, really like rinsing cups. Doesn't make any sense. No, we're there because we need to be there. We wouldn't need it if we didn't need it. The God stuff is not holding you back from going to AA. You are holding you back. You're hesitating, not because of the God stuff, but because to go to Alcoholics Anonymous is to admit that you are an alcoholic. That's why you don't want to go. Because of your stupid fucking pride. Take it from an atheist in AA. Your problem is not with God. You are your problem. And if you want to get sober, you need to get out of your own fucking way. Thank you for watching. And as always, good luck out there.